evening and welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow, ET Now's flagship series for the micro, small and medium enterprise sector of India. On the show tonight, we are exploring the relevance of the Internet of Things or IoT for a small business. What can this new technology phenomenon called IoT achieve for MSMEs? How can it help you increase your productivity and reduce costs in the long run? And what is the cost to benefit ratio of investing in IoT for a small company? On MSME Dialogues tonight, we are attempting to answer all of these questions and more. So please welcome the panel tonight. Devesh Shukla, Chief Executive Officer at GMR Smart Cities. Vinod Sivaramakrishnan, CIO and Head of E-Commerce at Usha International. Puneet Bhatia, Director of IT Advisory at KPMG. And from Mumbai, we are joined by Professor P.H. Painse, Dean of IT and Business Design at Wellinkar Institute of Management. Thank you, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to have you with us on Leaders of Tomorrow in our attempt to demystify IoT for the small segment. So, Puneet, perhaps I'd like to start with you. Can you explain to our MSME sector in lay terms what this whole phenomenon of the Internet of Things really means? How does it connect the unconnected? And what are the emerging trends that you're seeing in this space?
So, thank you. Just to explain this in a very simple layman's term, the Internet is a direct correlation between, the economic development. The more the number of people that get connected to the net, the more the number of people who have, or the more the number of devices that have an interconnectivity with each other. That means there are more possibilities in terms of interactions. The more the interactions are possible, that means there are more possibilities, that many possibilities for bettering of a specific system or a business creation of a new business model, or for example, being able to deliver services more effectively. So take a classical example in the earlier days when the mobile phones came in. If the more the number of people who could connect onto the mobile phone, that meant there is a greater degree of economic development possible. Now in the Internet of Things worlds, the more the number of devices and humans that can connect to the Internet, that means there are that many number of possibilities that exist out over there to deliver new forms of services. And those services could be, for example, better safety and security in an industrial environment. It could, for example, mean delivering better healthcare for citizens. It could mean, for example, delivering new types of services that erstwhile were not possible. So that means companies that produce products can create new ways of reaching those products out to the market and delivering services on top of it. And it eventually could also mean smart cities or better governance, etc. So in a way, it only improves what is sitting out over there because there is a better possibility of connecting individuals or devices or set of systems together and hence deliver new services.
All right. So that's a whole host of services that can really be unlocked with this whole phenomenon of the Internet of Things. And Devesh, I know that you're involved in developing smart cities, but from a business perspective, for a company, whether it's a manufacturing or a service company, what are the areas of business that can really be transformed by IoT?
In fact, if you look at it, I think any business today, any small business as well, can benefit from the IoT. And it's almost like taking an example before, previously when you used to have the internet and before internet was launched and available for many consumers, people used to think, why do I need to gain access to the internet? What's the value add in it for me? And now today you look at any small businesses and they would all say that, yes, I need to be on the internet. My presence needs to be there so I can be seen across the globe. And I guess IoT is the same thing, that people or the small businesses may not realize that they need the IoT right now. But I guess if they start taking the steps towards getting some of those IoT enabled devices or functionality, will help them in their efficiencies, whether it's manufacturing or engineering or customer services for that matter.
Professor Painse, in your view, how relevant is IoT for a small business, and are there particular sectors that it works better for?
I think, as was said earlier, IoT is definitely relevant to small businesses, and particularly so because of the resource limitation that they have. And one of the key resources is the owner himself, and One of the challenges for the owner is he's his own marketing person, he's his own finance person, he's also looking after production. So how does one allocate time effectively and get the best out of the investment that you've made in terms of the capital invested in the business? Now the question is, if I'm stuck to my factory, I'm ignoring my customers. If I'm outside in the field and I'm not able to monitor the production, so is it possible that IoT helps me to even do remote monitoring, for example? Things like these are, I think, ideas which are going to help small businesses in terms of effectively leveraging the resources that they have. Of course, some of the examples which were taken in the context of big companies also apply here, things like energy efficiency and other resources, water and things like that which get used, and of course maintenance and such things. People themselves are a critical resource. Actually, one of the biggest challenges which all SMEs face today is talent and people. And the question is, how do I minimize, not in terms of employment, but minimize the just the headcount for the sake of headcount and be able to deliver much more value, and that's something where IoT could probably contribute. That's my immediate take on that.
All right. So Puneet, if you have a connected work floor at a medium scale enterprise, what sort of new business opportunities does that really open up?
The biggest risk that today, like the professor pointed out, for a small business, if a machine goes down, you actually will be out of the business, or there is a risk of survivability. But imagine for a moment that if I am a MSME and I am a part of a larger ecosystem of an OEM, and I have to supply a critical part or a component that feeds into a larger system as a supplier, my ability to be able to leverage technology, internet, and be able to connect these devices allows me two advantages. One, I give better predictability to my end consumers about my ability to produce a part or a component and supply it on time. That's number one. The second aspect of it hence means I have that much of assurity on a revenue. I have that much of an assurity on a critical customer relationship, because of which this OEM will not go to someone else and give this job. And hence, as a result of which, it also allows me to do a better predictability around my operations, and as a result be able to deliver services to my end consumers. So this is from the shop floor side. The other aspect happens to be is, as an MSME grows, the operations, when they start scaling out, they go beyond his control. So again, the conversation was around skill sets. It's very difficult to get those skill sets to manage a span of operations. So hence, as a result, being able to remotely control and manage operations allows a better ability to deliver critical services in a shop floor environment. Many of them happen to be safety. So being able to predict safety, deliver safety for workforce also has a better return for an entrepreneur, because he's able to then, as a result, give back. He has no risks that he runs from a compliance or from a regulatory standpoint. So there are many such advantages that they have the moment they start thinking about Internet of Things, or in some parlance, digital, for their shop floors.
Vinod, what's the sort of consumer impact that IoT can have for a business of any scale, for that matter?
I think the key principle is always one of convenience and simplicity. You always look to drive these two things in whatever you offer. And one of the great things about machine-to-machine communications is it takes you out of the picture. So in a hypothetical scenario where your house knows that the door is open and you've left, and it locks it after a minute, you've just taken yourself out of that picture now, and you're delivering a benefit that you could not conceive earlier because it required somebody to do that. And to the point that we've heard before, a lot of the work that we do requires attendance, requires people around to make sure things are going on. So in a factory, you've got somebody that's actually seeing what's coming out as it comes out, and you're relying on that person's visual ability to spot a problem. And now you've taken that element out of the picture. I think consumers will obviously, once they understand that the technology is safe, and once they understand that the technology is actually reliable, that they, just like everything else that makes life convenient, will love it and will accept it pretty quickly as a part of their daily lives. And I think, the possibilities are just limited by the imagination of people and the relative value that is perceived by those innovations. But machines talking to machines to eliminate the need for me to intervene sounds like a win-win for me.
All right. Professor Pense, while we are talking of all these benefits and challenges, the one core thing that's required really is the infrastructure. And while the government is talking about its Digital India mission and achieving the whole ambitious, connected economy target, what is your feeling in terms of industry as well as government push? What does this whole dream really need? What kind of a push is required?
I think maybe Digital India is one of the visions, but we've never waited for any government push to either its internet or, adoption is something which happens at a individual level. And I would think IoT in the context of MSMEs particularly is about the MSME itself and its partners that it works with. So it's essentially a B2B kind of a scenario, which I think adoption is that much more easier, because once they are convinced about the value proposition, they would take the benefit of it, irrespective of whether infrastructure exists or it does not. If they need to invest in it, they do it because it makes business sense to them. So from that standpoint, I think even if it is not a pan-India kind of a phenomena, it will begin to happen at individual organizational level and spread across. But certainly if there's a government push in the direction of, and it's already, we are seeing some symptoms of it with a lot of companies, telcos getting into 4G and things like that. What is even more important today is the standardization of devices and the interfaces that go with it. So while one of the key aspects of IoT is about sensing, and the devices which sense phenomena in the world, whether it is voice, whether it is motion, whether it is temperature or pressure or pollution, I think these sensors are things which need to go down in cost. Secondly, they need to be standardized so that they can interface with standard devices which you can just plug and play from the mall. You could perhaps pick up a sensor and fit into some device and make it work for you. It should be as simple as that, and that's going to take some effort and some time. So maybe it's an industry consortium, it is a government coming together which probably works at these standards, and I'm not aware of it, but probably there's already work being done in that space.
All right. So we are going to talk about IoT after a short break as well. At this point, I'm going to head into the break, and on the other side, we'll talk about the IT infrastructure investment that IoT needs and the return on this investment for a small enterprise. Stay with us on Leaders of Tomorrow, MSME Dialogues, only on ET Now. Welcome back to Leaders of Tomorrow, MSME Dialogues. On the show tonight, we are exploring the vast potential that the phenomenon called Internet of Things offers to micro, small and medium enterprises. Puneet, we've been talking a lot about the impact, but let's talk a little bit about the cost. Is it viable for a small company to really be investing in IoT? What's the sort of investment that's required?
Look, it's extremely viable. It's not a very difficult, and Professor alluded to the fact that there is a very good startup ecosystem in Bangalore that's developing around IoT, and and that startup ecosystem is a good supplier for the MSMEs. So few business models, for example, from consumption perspective, like a cluster, for example, a large MSME cluster could adopt IoT as on a shared model, for example, and that's happening. I mean, it's happened in Tirupur, it will happen in some of the other manufacturing clusters in India. So that's one example of it. From an affordability standpoint, these startups are coming up with platforms that allow you to hook a gateway onto a machine. As a result, the ability for them to monitor critical parameters can be as low as 200 rupees per parameter per machine. So if on an average, a startup has, for example, 5 machines, you could do the maths. He only has to pay, for example, 200 rupees per parameter, 1,000 rupees per machine, 5,000 rupees, and 60,000 rupees over a course of the year. That is good enough for him if there is sufficient amount of network available for him to bring this data into a cloud and deliver predictive analytics on top of it. So in a shared model, and in a cluster kind of a model, MSMEs can adopt Internet of Things. And I think there is enough ecosystem in India building and developing which are talking about technologies ranging from sensors to gateways to platforms to help them connect and adopt this technology.
Vinod, from a manpower perspective, what will it entail for a small enterprise in terms of skilling and upgrading the manpower that's required?
I think that's a very interesting question, because today we tend to think of roles in terms of the work that needs to be done largely from a supervisory or from a action point of view. But now when you talk about what Puneet talked about, which is one person across locations manning or doing the work that was earlier done by 10 people that were in these locations, now the nature of the work transforms from an operator to a higher order of work, which is really a controller in a manner of speaking, who's actually dynamically allocating resources across these. And that is going to call for a skill set that is significantly higher than what is available today. To the point that entire functions like production planning and so on could suddenly be faced with the challenge where these people are operators, and now they're thinking like data scientists, now they're thinking like programmers, now they're thinking like technical software people. And that is really going to put a lot of pressure, if you will, on these skills that we have. I mean, the IT industry already pretty much sucks up everybody that we have that has the skill sets, and I think it's going to be quite a challenge to get ourselves thinking in terms of a traditional manufacturing company suddenly requiring skill sets that they've never dealt with in their lives. So it will be interesting for sure.
All right. So, Davesh, there are the early adopters of technology in the MSME sector, and there are the tech laggards. So, we'll leave out the laggards for the time being and talk about early adopters. For them also, what sort of an entrepreneurial mindset change is really required in order to adopt new technologies, whether it's IoT or whether it's any other emerging technology for that matter?
I guess the mindset is looking at the history and trend of the businesses that occur over here is, it used to be manufacturing, it used to be engineering, and now it's all about customer services. And I guess the mindset is, how do I stay ahead of the game? And you don't have to be massive. You don't have to be a large organization to say, I'm going to make an investment in IoT enablement. So if I'm going to be the small, medium enterprise and I need to deliver a small part of that service to the community or to the customers, how do I get myself ahead? And I guess it's looking at all those processes that's involved in IoT and saying, do I own that? Or like Puneet and Vinod was saying, or do I outsource that? And if I'm a customer services organization, which most of the SMEs are, then you look at it and saying, people used to get data before. They used to go to machines, physically look at that data, analyze it, and then decide what to do. And nowadays, in the future, is going to be about machines saying that I am going wrong, something is going wrong with this machine, and proactively passing that information to the small enterprise and say, excuse me, there's somebody's AC that's going to play up in the next week, or there's somebody's car that's going to need servicing the next week. So these people are now proactively approaching the customers. So I think those guys that are ahead of the game can stay ahead of the service as well.
Right. All right. So a lot of new business ideas also floating about for startups as well as the MSME sector. So as we are running out of time, I'm going to ask each one of you for tips. That one tip for an MSME entrepreneur who's looking to begin the IoT journey. Puneet, let's start with you.
I think if it's so I see this entrepreneur from two angles. Either this entrepreneur is someone who's supplying a product or a technology to the market. That means there is possibilities, that many more possibilities if he is an early adopter of technology as an embedded product, and hence he can create new models. So there is a lot of revenue opportunities that he actually can capture, new markets he can capture. On the other hand, if it's a manufacturer, if it's a consumer of IoT, I would say, for example, someone who actually requires this, then there are a lot of efficiency gains, safety improvements, possibilities to be able to deliver better services to their own customers because of being able to adopt IoT. So there is clearly merit in adopting, and it's a question of how they start that journey. Sometimes it's a lot about not a single individual, but a group of individuals, promoters sitting together and saying there's merit in us actually doing this, adopting this as a cluster or as a set of individuals, and then see better value out of it.
Okay, so take the cluster approach, perhaps that is what you would be suggesting, Vinod?
I just say, that they should probably just dive into it. There is always this tendency to wait until, somebody else has done it or that there is widespread adoption of this. If you look at it, and to Professor's point about device manufacturers getting ahead of the game, you want to be the first to exploit the possibilities that are coming with the equipment that you've invested in and use it fully. And I think if you wait for the ecosystem to stabilize around that, then it's everybody looking at everybody else. I'd say the ones that get into this and figure it out and see the opportunities to monetize this before everybody else are the ones that stand to win. So my tip would be really that they need to dive into it right like now.
All right, take the first mover advantage. Right, Davesh?
Yeah, I would say drop the reluctance. If anybody has got reluctance in terms of moving ahead, drop that ahead, drop that down straight away, because the large organizations are making all of the devices, most of them are going to be IoT enabled now, whether you look at printers, fridges, alarms, securities, cars, whatever. So don't worry about the investment required. That the large organization is going to do, because there's competition there. If one organization puts an IoT enablement, the other one's going to follow. So all we need to do as an entrepreneur is to say, how do I utilize the IoT? Already it's enabled. How do I utilize that and make my processes more efficient? So no reluctancy.
Okay. Professor Pense, your success mantra for MSMEs who are looking to take up the IoT journey?
The essence in every business is customer focus, and so far customer focus has only meant probably sending SMSs and promotions to them. What is missed out many a time is the context in which that promotion is received. So if I receive a promotion on a month end when I have no money left in my pocket, that promotion is of no meaning. But if I get it on the first, probably where I have just got my salary, maybe there's chance that I might spend and buy your product. Now that context is extremely important. So what an MSME needs to understand is, how do I sense the behavior of the customer and the context in which he operates, and therefore how can I provide him services? If he just keeps focus on this, IoT is just a means to achieving that.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Professor Pense. Thank you, gentlemen, for all those insights and helping demystify the Internet of Things. With that, it's a wrap for tonight on Leaders of Tomorrow MSME Dialogues. Hope you enjoyed those insights on the Internet of Things, the technology that experts are now calling the third wave of the Internet. Do feel free to write in to us with your thoughts, ideas or insights. You can email us at leadersoftomorrow@timesgroup.com or reach us using social media by just putting in the hashtag LOT, or call us on the number you see on your screen. Thanks for joining us. Goodbye and good night.